It was near the end of high school, 2006-ish, fall in northern Wisconsin, perfect stomping around town weather. One Friday after school, I was over at my high school boyfriend P's house playing video games. Around 7 p.m., we typically would meet up with our whole crew at a local restaurant, but we still had several hours to kill. We were getting bored and it was so lovely outside, so P suggested we go walk the train tracks on the west side of town. At the time, there was only a Fleet Farm and a small burger joint near the tracks, and that was about it. Miles of woods on either side surrounded the tracks. As it was perfect weather, which doesn't last long in Wisconsin, I agreed, and we jumped in his car and drove across town. We parked his little car to the side of the burger joint. At this point, it is late afternoon, about dusk, sun about to set. We hop out of the car, walk about a block where the train tracks cross the street, and head on down the tracks through the woods. That area didn't get as many trains going through as a different set of tracks in town, and there was also plenty of space to the left and right of the tracks, into the woods if a train did approach. It seemed safe. You could see maybe a mile in each direction if a train was coming, and to either side, just tall pines. We're walking down, balancing on the tracks, talking random, jumping over stuff, and doing random things for maybe 5 to 10 minutes as we moved ahead. Up ahead of us, we could see a few boxcars off to the side of the tracks, and although this feels creepy, but it was normal. As we approached them, we could see there were 2 boxcars attached to each other, maybe another 10 to 20 feet, and then a single boxcar behind them. I got the heebie-jeebies as we approached the boxcars, but they were both shut. So, we just peeked around them. We kept walking, and talking, and the sun was now down and it was twilight. Quiet. We are both looking down as we walk past the boxcars, balancing and such. We get past them maybe another length of a boxcar when I just have the sense to look up. That's when I see it. I stopped short. I swear the hair on my arm stood up, and suddenly I felt like a prey animal that had been spotted. P, what's that up there? There's someone on the tracks. He stopped and looked up. What looked like maybe half a mile to a mile down the tracks, standing directly in the middle of them, was the shape of a person, or what I thought was. But for how far away it was, the figure was unnaturally tall, standing stiff and still, arms at sides, with what looked like the shape of a bowler hat or something. I can still picture it. Now P doesn't joke around with ghost stories and alien tales, he's a non-believer. But he saw it too. We need to go, he said. He grabbed my hand and spun me back to the direction we came from. We were walking very briskly, but if you have ever been on train tracks, you know it's all small rocks and pebbles, so it's a little rough. About a minute passed. My heart was pounding, and I looked back over my shoulder. This person, who was originally about a mile away or so, was so much closer. It's like he suddenly jumped half the distance between where he originally was to where we were. But still, the same sickeningly tall featureless shadow with a hat, standing still, arms to sides, stood in the middle of the tracks. P. I actually screamed, making him whip his head around. I've never seen this guy scared. He grabbed my hand tighter and broke off into a sprint. P is about 6 feet tall and I'm 5 feet 4 inches, so his stride is a bit longer than mine. I had difficulty keeping up because a couple years prior, I recovered from a fractured knee and femur, and it was common knowledge I cannot run. Now, if you've ever seen the cartoons with someone running and the other person is kind of flapping behind the runner, held by the hand, that's what I felt like. He took off. My legs moved, but my toes barely skimmed the tracks. We ran past the boxcars off to the side, and as we were about to get past the 2 that are hooked together, I stole one more frantic look over my shoulder. There he was, 1 boxcar away, same weird proportions, like a dark opaque shadow. I swear my eyes bugged out of my head, and my body and adrenaline screamed from inside of me to just run. I forced my legs down and pushed my own self into a run. We plowed forward, no more glances back, hooked back into the street and frantically fumbled our way back into his car, slamming and locking the doors behind us. I remember both of us sitting there, panting, staring forward for a good minute or two until snapping back to it with a "what the hell was that?" The sun went down, and nothing could be seen toward the tracks. We went to our hangout with the crew at 7, chomping at the bit to tell everyone what happened. No one believed us or cared, really. I told my dad later on, and he says so many people died building that railroad, it was probably a ghost. Thanks, Dad. Fast forward to around 2011 and I was in college. P and I broke up and don't keep in touch. One day, I get a text from him out of the blue, a link to that Slender Man game. I remember sitting in my dorm with a chill as I watched the preview and felt sick to my stomach, how he only moves toward you when you aren't looking and is frozen staring at you when you look back. Ugh. I read the Wikipedia page and creepypasta and all that shit. I know all of that stuff is made up, but the similarity to what we experienced freaks me out. After the text from P, I looked up the chunk of railroad where it went down in my hometown on Google Maps. I saw the area was much more developed with shopping and housing around, but there was still a little stretch surrounded by trees, which was the one we walked down. I'm going back home for Thanksgiving and I was thinking about taking a jaunt to the tracks, but reading all these spooky stories made me change my mind. Just in case it is some entity, I don't want to take it back with me. I laid in bed a few seconds longer. Reaching over to switch on my bedside lamp, I tried to remember exactly what had stolen my sweet slumber away. As I swung my legs over the side of the bed and heaved myself up, I checked the time on my phone, and to my dismay it was only just midnight, the witching hour. Knowing that sleep would only evade me, I left my bedroom for the kitchen, a good cup of coffee on my mind, and as I passed by my front door, a chill spread like liquid fire down my spine. It's only winter, I told myself, focusing again on the coffee plan. Measuring out the scoops, water, and preparing my coffee kept me occupied, but as the dark liquid boiled, I had nothing left to keep my mind from wandering off. Just like that, the chill returned and I couldn't help but glance behind myself, to the front door. It stood there innocently enough, just like always. The deadbolt was still in place and I could see nothing amiss with it. Turning back to my coffee, I did my best to forget about the feeling. With my cup in hand, I started walking back towards my bedroom. As I walked by the front door, I decided that a quick glance out of the peephole would help calm my restless mind. The chill worsened with each step I took towards the door and further away from the safety and warmth of my blankets. I pressed my empty hand against the cold, metal door and took a deep breath before leading my eye to the peephole. At first, I could only see an inky blackness and somehow seemed to swirl in itself. When I blinked in, the void melted away. I wished it hadn't. There in its place, stood what I could only guess was once a man. The limbs were long and inhumanly awkward, with bulky joints branching off into several arms, not unlike the branches of a tree. The creature was draped in a black suit, somehow making the thing more nightmarish to me. The icing on the proverbial cake, however, was what passed as the hellish thing's face. It was as though my mind blurred the ghastly visage to spare itself further shock and horror. I shoved myself away from the door with the hand still pressed against it. The scalding mug of coffee fell, the liquid burning my bare legs as I fell backwards and tried to crawl away from the door. I knew, somehow, that my mind hadn't been playing tricks on me. As I crab walked away from the door, I watched as the tendrils as black as the void I first saw, snake around through the cracks of the door. I was trapped between the instinct to flee and the gut feeling to not turn my back on the door. When the door jolted, the urge to flee overcame me and I slipped in the burning liquid as I tried to make it back to my room. I knew deep down that I was trapping myself in a corner, but I had to get away from the door. I was halfway down the hallway when I heard the previously locked door creak open. I screamed and slipped into a wall, cracking my chin on it and stunning myself. After that, there was only blackness. "Nicole," a warm, male voice snapped her out of her trance. As she turned around, she was met by one of her sister's doctors. Nicole nodded, not sure if she should say anything, or even if she could find her voice, if she did have something to say. That morning, she had gotten an urgent phone call from the hospital, saying that her sister, Lindsay, was there. Before they had even let her see Lindsay, the doctors had pulled her off to the side and insisted that they talk to her about what might have happened. Phrases like self-inflicted and assault had been thrown around and Nicole could feel her mind reel. She still hadn't fully understood what they had been saying until she saw Lindsay with her own eyes. Her little sister had a bandage wrapped around her head, covering both of her ears as well as her eyes. The doctors said that it was to keep Lindsay's now deadened eyes from drying out and to try to keep the infection out of the wounds that Lindsay had made to her ears. The doctors had guessed that either Lindsay or someone else had jammed a pencil into her ears to keep her off balance or to deafen herself against something. There was the mix of first and second degree burns on Lindsay's hands, legs, and feet, from what was assumed to be the coffee which the neighbors found slipped all over the entry to Lindsay's apartment. As Nicole walked into her sister's hospital room the first time, she thought she had spied the silhouette of a man in the window. That, she knew, was impossible because her sister's room was on the third floor of the hospital.